Hi, it's Joshua Loya, martial artist, adventurer, public speaker, man about town, if you will. I'm here with my first martial arts instructor, or the man who I've studied with martial arts with the most, Mr. Soke Shihan Scot Conway, and I've been training with him since 2005. Thank you for coming and inviting me into your school yet again. Just had class not too long ago, last class of 2016, and give us a kind of an introduction as to who you are. Certainly you have taught me martial arts for the last 11 years, but how did you get started on your martial arts journey, and maybe what are some of the reasons why you continue to train and teach?
Well, my martial arts journey began when I was 6 years old, 1971, walked into my first class. Trained in a variety of martial arts here and there for just sometimes a few months, sometimes a couple of years at a time, as we moved around and went to different places, and programs were at different community centers. And ultimately, what got me to decide this is something that I'm doing. I was a teenager, and partly realizing a little bit about how much it was helping me with my discipline, my focus, and my concentration. But a big thing was the self-defense aspect, and being able to have my friends feel safer when I showed up, to have the bullies at the school, stand down when I walked in and said, hey, you need to cut that out. Because I had developed a reputation. Honestly, my reputation exceeded my actual performance that I could do, but back then, martial arts was a bit more scary to people than it is today.
Sure. And you've trained with several different masters, and then in, was it 1990, I think, you began this, as in your own words, this crazy idea of developing your own martial art. Maybe tell us a little bit about the history of Guardian Kempo, if you will.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, if anyone's thinking of starting their own martial art, if your intention is to do a good job, don't do it. It's insane. Now, I was lucky that I had the help of several masters. Several system heads came alongside to share with me their wisdom, their experience, to help me evaluate what I was doing. If I was doing this completely by myself, forget it. Wouldn't have been very good. And wouldn't have been probably very healthy for me to do. But with the help of the other masters, started off, I made a mistake. I decided I was going to build the art I wanted to study. Well, when you're building the art, someone who's been doing martial arts for 20 years wants to study, like 1 in 10,000 people is going to want to do that. But with the help of the masters and their guidance and their experience teaching, which was invaluable, being able to break it down, and so that's why we have karate, jiu-jitsu, kobu-jitsu, so that we break these three out at the lower levels, and I'll promote people up to the third dan maximum in those. And then the kempo system, it basically does a bit of everything, which is both its strength and its weakness. One thing to clarify is some people have said, oh, you took the best from all these arts and put them together. I don't know enough about those arts to know the best in the arts. That most of my outside black belts are 1st to 3rd degree. I've got 1 6th degree and 1 7th degree in other arts besides the one that I created. I might know enough about those to arguably say that I could pull some of the best in there, but Guardian Kempo isn't built from the best of the arts. What it's built from is a harmonization principles I learned in the art, which is a very different thing than the best.
Well, it seems like an important distinction to make. I mean, we see a lot of, I guess, hybrid martial arts, new martial arts. People put it that way, and obviously many of us have seen the Ameridote Master Ken, best of all, worst of none. It's a worthwhile parody, but that's, I think, one of the important pieces of the Guardian Kempo story is that you didn't do it by yourself. You're very open about the fact that you had help from several masters. And you're also not above, I guess, sharing when you didn't do as well as perhaps you thought, or sharing an experience. You're one of the few people that has the distinction of having taken the Gracie Challenge. What was that?
1991.
Yeah, and then you ended up writing a Black Belt article in Black Belt magazine talking about your experiences, and this was pre-UFC days, I believe. that,
Yes.
you fought Mr.
Yeah.
Royler Gracie.
Now, some people have referred to it as UFC Zero, because it was the first time that an actual Gracie fight had a worldwide audience to the magazine. Part of the story that happened there is I really wanted some better grappling in my style of kempo than I had already learned. And I was working with some people from various disciplines at different levels, and it wasn't quite what I was looking for. There's some very good stuff. I mean, one of the people I was working with, like in judo, had been an Olympic judo coach in Mexico. I was working with some wrestlers on some stuff, and some other people doing different types of grappling, but it wasn't filling the particular thing I was looking for. But this Gracie challenge was out there, and they had been in the magazines, and they were largely being regarded as, well, these arrogant people, they don't know what they're talking about. And I'd already done
we know
some
a little
work.
bit better now.
Yeah, I've been doing some work already for the magazines and writing, so I was a known quantity of them. So I was able to just call the editor and ask, like, would you be interested in someone actually going and fighting these people and having an article about the actual fight, regardless of the outcome? And say, oh yeah, someone would be willing to do that, but no one wants to take the chance because the reputation's on the line. I thought, well, I'll go and I'll write the article. And so they said, well, that would be great if you could convince them to do it, because if I'm going to fight and then I'm going to write the article and you're Gracie, what's your concern going to be?
How are you going to portray me or my family?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly.
And so I had several conversations with Horian, and basically the deal that I made with him was, I'll write the article, you get to proofread the article before I send it in. So when we send it in, it's the article that I wrote, but he approves. So it doesn't even go to the magazine until he's seen it first and he's approved it, along with the photographs that we're going to use of it. So he could be convinced that it's going to be fair. And so with that understanding, then we set to the fight. I was going to fight Royler, who at the time was a 7-time Brazilian national champion. And we had 2 matches. In the first match, the idea was I would fight when I thought it would be appropriate in a street fight. Well, by the time you get that far with a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner, you've already lost. That became pretty clear in the first fight. In the second fight, it'd be a bit more aggressive. Now, the thing that I think was really interesting, and now I have a better understanding why that happened, is the more I fought, the faster I lost. Because whenever you do anything, you're always giving something to an opponent. And the Gracies at that time were already masters of dealing with people from other disciplines. The people from other disciplines, well, we had no clue in 1991. We were finding out. And it wasn't until we got into the UFCs that we saw, okay, well, the Gracies have these mad skills, but that's just them. And then I think it was in number 3 that we didn't have a Gracie win, but it was still a grappler.
Sure. Well, and this is also, a lot of this is pre-internet days too, so we didn't have the benefit of being able to watch a lot of this footage either.
Yep, and so, I mean, the big wake-up call, I think, was when it wasn't a Gracie who won and go, oh, so it really is just the ground game. It's not that this one family has this, like, insane superpower skills. It's, we're missing this, and we all need to learn it. And Horian was incredibly gracious. After we had the match, we did the article, it was showing up in the magazines. Even before then, we corresponded, we talked some more on the phone. He gave me a full set of their training videos, since I lived out of town, so that I could start learning some of their technique, because I was very impressed with what it is that they were doing. And obviously now the whole world knows that
Sure.
It's impressive.
No, I think that's worth, and it's worth stating, I think, that you still have tremendous respect for the Gracie family and then the influence and impact that they've had on martial arts. It's clear to hear you talk that you have a lot of respect for that, for their contribution.
Yep. Oh, and Royler. If he and I ever fought again, I know enough now, he'd have to beat me a different way.
But even still, I think you've said before, he'd likely still beat you now.
Well, if I had money to bet on it, I'd bet it all on him. But if we're playing a game where it's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu's game, I am not going to win that game.
Sure.
But I would make him beat me differently this time, though.
Well, that's interesting. Now, and I guess this cycles back to something else that, obviously, having been one of your Guardian martial arts students for the last 11 years, I know the answer to this, but for the sake of the people watching, the focus of Guardian Kempo and the Guardian Arts is not competition. That it is, while certainly your students have competed in both one-on-one competition as well as kata and various other divisions, that the primary focus is self-defense, but there's also some other elements and important aspects to Guardian martial arts training. Specifically, I'm thinking of the philosophical principles, because you talked about the need for there to be something more than just the fighting.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, on the fighting part, our track record for that speaks for itself. A lot of people, it's easy to talk about how good something is for self-defense. Our students have had to use it. We're at 30 times so far, and it's worked all 30 times, which, by the way, is as much luck as it is skill and attributes. Yeah. Because, like one of the students, I was just talking about this afternoon, he trained with me for 2 weeks. He knew this one technique. He could make one technique work. And someone attacked him 2 weeks after he started training with me. But they attacked, with the attack, he knew that one technique against. That's pure luck. The fact it's a good technique and the technique works, that's the system. The fact that he learned it well enough to do it, that's a quality student. But the fact that he got attacked with the only thing he knew how to defend against, that was pure luck. And in that whole mix from the self-defense, if all you know how to do is how to be the bad guys, you're really kind of missing a whole bunch of what our art is about. Now, not all arts are lifestyle martial arts. Ours is. And part of that is because statistically, at least in the United States, we know 2 out of 3 people will get through their entire lives and never have a serious fight. And that's just based upon the uniform crime statistics in the United States. But everybody lives life every day. Everybody has relationships, everybody has emotions, everybody has to interact with people, deal with problems, and basically live life. And so we want to make sure that we're not just teaching people how to fight, we're helping guide people in how to live, to understand deeper concepts and principles that they can think about and decide for themselves, how much of this do I want to live? How much do I want to walk out? How much of this should be part of the world, and I want to be part of the conduit by which it's brought to the world. And we spend a lot of time on that.
And one of the other things I've noticed, in only having studied with so many people, I'm not sure how rare this is, but one of the things I think is commendable about you and about the environment that you foster at your school is your willingness and acceptance and even encouragement for your students to have outside training. Obviously, people who know me, I've gone on to study Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the last few years, and had have a rank with another karate instructor, and you've been very encouraging of that. Even though I have not been here but once a week lately, you're still very interested in my personal martial arts journey, and I'm not the only one of your students that has had outside training, and you seem to be very encouraging of people finding the path for them and the things that are going to help their development. And I think that's. Would you like to expand as to why you do approach things the way you do?
Okay, yeah, actually, and this was just part of the discussion with some of my senior students this evening. I'm going to particularly address this to any other instructors in particular. If my goal, my agenda is I want to be the teacher, I want to be the master, then whenever my students go get outside training, it's like, well, it's like they're two-timing. If they leave me to go somewhere, well, now they abandon me. But if my focus is I care about my students learning, then when they go get additional outside training, that outside training is help. Some other instructor is helping me with my students learning. So whether we take people to conventions and they learn in seminars, or someone goes and they actively enroll in some outside classes and they're learning some other disciplines, that's all help for me because my agenda is I want my students learning. And if someone else can help my students learn, then they're helping me as an instructor. And if someone else can help my students learn better than I can, or what someone else is teaching is better for my students than what I teach. I want them there because what matters is the student. What matters is their development and what they learn. And when you come in with that mentality, I'm not in competition with any other instructors. It's not a fight over which one of us gets to be the master. All of us are helping these people learn.
Excellent. And I think that, all of us, whether it's martial arts related or whether it's just in our own personal relationships, would do well to kind of think more expansively that way. Another question, just kind of relevant to martial arts more, because that's largely what we're doing here. Because you've been around for a while now, and a
couple of years,
just a few. What do you think are some of both the good things that you see largely expansively within the martial arts industry, and specifically in the West, because that's what you're most familiar with, that you think is being done really well? And what do you think are some of the challenges that martial artists, martial arts instructors, and people kind of learning about this method of learning more about life, what are some of the challenges as well as some of the good things that are happening within martial arts these days?
No, well, I'm not sure how anyone could have an exhaustive list of both of those.
Yeah, you don't have to go into the fullness of it.
In the totality of the martial arts community. There's always people being brilliant, and there's always people being stupid. Basically, martial artists are people, and organizations have people in them, and so it's the normal human dynamic. It's not any better or worse than the normal people, which honestly, I admit, sometimes I find kind of sad, because when I was originally coming up there, I kind of had this idea of the philosopher master, and that they kind of had it together, and they were kind of somewhat zen. And I'll tell you in particular, this last election season has shown me how just very, very human people who have been in martial arts for decades still are. But part of what martial arts, I think, is doing poorly is there's too much of an emphasis on physical performance fast. And someone is doing things that might be great for performance now, but it'll be damaging to your body in the long term. One of my colleagues was talking about how his kicks are so bad now that he really has to back off even more until he gets knee surgery, and he's in his 40s. And you're thinking about how many of us have arthritis, and how many of us have knee problems and back problems and neck problems because of the way we trained back in the 60s for the older masters, in the 70s, and even in the 80s. And so there was this big shift, and I think this was a good aspect of it, to what we now call new school, safer training. That we don't want people getting beat up while they're training. In fact, one of the things that we have, our signature teaching, is called safe to be safe. And the idea of you want to train safe. So you want to not get beat up while you're trying to learn to not get beat up. You want to not get hurt while you're trying to train to not get hurt. And a whole bunch of my generation and older than me masters were beginning to realize kind of how ludicrous it was that our worst injuries, our bodies needing surgery and such, was coming out of our martial arts training that we were doing so that we could be safer. And we created this shift. Now, the downside of some of that shift is it's hard to teach people effective self-defense without really pushing them. And so we developed kind of a four-pronged system, and we break it out into pieces so that we can still get there. But on the downside, it seems like some of the younger generation of instructors are going back to that old school style of teaching that a lot of my generation has seen has resulted in shoulder surgeries and knee surgeries and back surgeries and really bad arthritis and all these issues as you get older. And we really don't want people to have those issues. But that's kind of the new thing is the old thing. And I'll tell you, we made some really, really tough black belts back in the day. But the downside is we also blew out a bunch of people that could have really benefited from their training, because we basically beat them up enough that they didn't want to stay. But had they stayed, they would have been better than they were when they left. And we're kind of getting back to some of that again, where we're getting kind of that highly competitive. But most of martial arts, the part that at least I'm connected with, we're very family-oriented, very much an ohana, an extended family of masters and martial artists, and we're very cordial to one another. We're respectful of each other's arts. We recognize the niches and the places for all these different styles based on what somebody wants to do. And I really like that kind of that culture that we're building, largely through some of these multi-art organizations. And that I really enjoy being a part of that, and all the relationships I have with masters whose arts might be very different than mine. But we do things our way for our reason, they do things their way for their reasons. They appreciate the respect they receive. We appreciate the respect that we receive.
Very good. And then, thank you. And then, I guess just a few more questions. I know we only have so much time, but I'm curious too. Who have been some of your personal heroes, both martial arts related and otherwise? Because I know that you inject a lot of, again, wisdom into the philosophy that you impart to your students, and you have more things that you do beyond martial arts. Who are some of the people that you look at for either for inspiration or that you think have most significantly influenced, whether you train with them extensively or not?
Okay, well, if we kind of stay centered more on the martial arts realm, probably we're looking at my core instructors, Julian General Lau, Al Tahiro, Karl Marx, Clement Riedner, Rick Boyer, Sam Kuoha. Those are the people that I probably trained with the most, of course, because that's the people I got my black belts from. But also a lot of other people have had a strong influence on the art. Wai Ming Chao, the late grandmaster from Wu Mui Kung Fu, his work and our relationship had a tremendous impact. Wally J with Small Circle Jiu Jitsu had a tremendous impact. There's a couple of Aikido masters, John Damien being the senior most one, and the Aikido that I learned from him had an impact on the work I was doing. Philosophically, a lot of Stephen Hayes' books and writing, and then subsequently my relationship with him has helped influence some stuff has come through Dan Santo and Jeet Kune Do. And essentially, I have been blessed with being, at least at the seminar level and at a friendship or a correspondence or connection level, been connected to a whole bunch of masters and system heads, without whom this art could not be what this art is. And so many people have contributed bits and pieces and ideas and philosophies and particular guidance that it would be hard to really nail that down. Outside of martial arts, John Maxwell was my first leadership instructor. Back when he had one book, when I had the John Maxwell book. Now there's 50, 60, who knows? I mean, he might have published another book since I woke up this morning.
Sure.
I was learning leadership from John Maxwell, leadership from Tim Elmore, now growingleaders.com, attending Tony Robbins seminars, learning stuff from Brian Tracy, and just so many great seminars from so many great leaders and instructors that have influenced what I've learned and what I've built and what's fed back in, and then shows up in my books and my programs too.
And speaking of books, I know that you have quite a number of books out, mostly on Kindle and through Amazon. You have a new book coming out, I think, next month. You're celebrating have a release party in a couple weeks.
Yep.
And maybe tell us about that book in particular, but any other books you think would be of benefit to the people watching.
Okay. Well, right now there's 15 books. If you go to Amazon, you search Scot Conway, and you spell it correctly, S-C-O-T, just one T, C-O-N-W-A-Y, you'll probably find all 15 of my books I would expect. This new book is called The Princess is a Knight. And the basic idea of it is that modern women seem to get kind of pushed down the domestic track or pushed down the career track. That it's either the traditionalist or it's the feminist, and there's like different sets of principles and ideals that are taught. And I've been doing this for 2.5, almost 3 decades. And I learned a lot of this from my mother, to be honest. And the idea of the princess as a knight is that you can do both. The core of it is to have that set of principles that applies across the board. Where it's not like this is who I have to be for the job, but this is who I have to be for home. And you get lost in the middle. And being able to have that knightly power and still be able to be the Disney princess. And understand that princesses include, well, Wonder Woman is a princess, and Xena is the warrior princess, and so
Clearly.
just because someone's a princess doesn't mean that they're all foo-foo, girly, and don't have any independent agency. That by combining it and finding the center of it all, so that you can be grounded there, is enormously powerful. I've been getting feedback from a lot of women who have had copies of the pre-release, and I've gotten nothing but positive feedback from them. One of them was like one step shy of saying, preach it, brother. And that was a lot of fun.
Had to feel really good.
She was very enthusiastic when she, yeah. And you almost saw the hand go, you just preach it.
And that's got to feel good to get that kind of feedback.
It is, because I really want to help, primarily in that case, the women bridge the sides there and be more empowered to be able to make their own choices without feeling like they get shoved down one road.
Sure. And I, obviously neither of us can speak from an experiential level, but, we both know several women who are pulled in those multiple different directions. So I think be interested to hear back from people. So if you've read the book, feel free to put a comment below. And then,
if you think it's brilliant, say thank you to my mom, because I learned most of that stuff from her.
And she is one of the. Your mother gives great hugs, by the way. She always tries to sneak up on me. I remember we've done several demonstrations. She'll come up behind me. We'll be at the fair, and she has such this unique way of giving hugs that instantly, even though I can't see her, she'll sneak up behind me. I immediately know it's her. She's like, "How do you know?" But it's because she is that inviting and that powerful. That she's a very strong woman and a very feminine woman, both, and she combines both those aspects of her personality quite well. So. It's definitely been a privilege to meet her. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out? Or
no, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Thank you.
But if something else comes up, I'm always happy to do any more of these, as might be helpful to you or to any of the audience.
Cool. And for any of you, feel free to like, share, whatever, because I'm probably going to post this both on Facebook.
Subscribe.
Yep, subscribe indeed. But I'm going to post this both on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me or just even put a link below. And you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Joshua Loya, Servant Warrior, or search for Adventure Mind, which is my other page. That's Loya, Loya. And the other thing I will say is that if you have any other people in the San Diego region or otherwise, martial arts or adventure-oriented that you think would make for an interesting conversation, feel free to suggest that either directly or just in the comments. So thank you for joining us. It's our first time out at this, and hope we do some more. So thank you.
All right, thank you.